Das Race News today is really pertinent to what's going on because we've been kind of following this story. It's about Bon Appetit, and it's kind of crazy because this article kind of reminded me that at the beginning of the pandemic, I was watching so much Bon Appetit stuff. I was like, constantly watching it. All the different kinds of things. I went and watched some of their old stuff too, and now like they're nowhere. For people who don't kind of remember, the Bon Appetit leadership got called out. Right, he got removed, and under the allegations that the people of color chefs were not being paid as equitably. They weren't being paid as well as the white chefs who were appearing and doing the YouTube videos. So there's this whole thing, and Bon Appetit has kind of gone dark for a little bit while all these negotiations are happening. But now there's been an update. And it doesn't look good, okay? And I'll read the headline here. It says 5 Bon Appetit stars have exited the test kitchen. The test kitchen is sort of like that video space they have, and that's really where like kind of like the foundation of the whole like operation is. So I'll read it here. In simultaneous statements released on Twitter and Instagram on Thursday, Priya Krishna, Soleh Al-Wale, and Rick Martinez announced they've left the publication's enormously popular video series. The decision comes after negotiations with Condé Nast Entertainment for more equitable pay, which the company's video leadership promised, but which Krishna says was just quote-unquote lip service. So I believe they're still working for the magazine, Condé Nast magazine, which is like a separate thing. And recently, actually, the Bon Appetit magazine just hired a woman of color to sort of lead that. So maybe that's going to be dope. But, I mean, they're not going to be on Test Kitchen. That was the big thing. This was a huge like platform, right? And millions of views for each thing. But I don't know. They like tweeted about it, and they basically couldn't come to an agreement about how much they were going to be featured on the show, on the shows, in the videos, and also like they couldn't get to agreement about how much they were going to get paid. It's kind of crazy. I don't know. I mean, yeah.
Alina, had you heard about that? Like, have you been keeping up with this? Do you have friends who are in that circle?
I don't have anyone in that circle. I have been paying attention. What a mess. Like, it's like such a mess.
Well, you've done stuff for all kinds of, media brands out there cooking food and shit. Like, I don't know if you've experienced that yourself or.
I mean, when I heard the amount of money that they were getting and were upset about getting, I was just like, fuck you guys, I hardly get paid at all. But then I'm like, oh God, have I been taken advantage of? And I just didn't realize. I just assumed that was like the going rate.
Right.
I don't know, because I'm not in media. Media is not my thing. I do restaurants, and that's kind of like, that's been my focus. So really anything that I got paid for outside of a restaurant felt good.
Yeah.
I feel like they bring this up. Bo and Yang had a very good tweet reply to it. So I think Priya Krishna had tweeted this thing. She posted 3 screenshots of her note app and explained the whole thing. And they're saying like, chefs, or I was going to say chefs of color, COCs, cocks. They're often carelessly framed as experts of their communities. That's something that you and I experienced one time when we did a YouTube thing. It's like, oh, you're Japanese, you must know the history of ramen. It's like, no, I don't know anything,
Yeah.
And we don't have the privilege to walk away, right? Like a lot of comedians, if somebody comes up to you and says, hey, Lena, do you want to do a thing for Complex Media? You'd be like, yeah. And they'd be like, we're going to pay you $50. You're not really in the position to walk away because you want the, this is back then when you're still doing the restaurant, but you want the exposure, right? They're going to pay you an exposure. And Bo and Yang responded and was like, this fucking sucks. I'm so sorry, Priya. I can't wait to see you thrive in an environment that values you. And I think about that a lot because I think for a lot of, I don't know if it's an Asian thing or a POC thing, but we don't necessarily value ourselves because
for sure we don't.
I think it's related to the fact that like we're not really on TV, or like you don't see a lot of like Asian leaders. I mean, maybe in food there's a few, but in comedy certainly not. I mean, I was just thinking about, this isn't that long ago when there was a book called The Flash Boys or something that was really popular. It's like a New York best time seller, and it's about this guy who works on Wall Street, and they were going to make a movie adaptation with Aaron Sorkin, and Aaron Sorkin was like, I can't have an Asian lead because there are no Asian stars, or the Asian leads don't make money. The Asian leads don't make money is what he said specifically. And things like that kind of trickle down. And as an Asian comedian, sometimes I think like, well, maybe well, they're not going to put me on because if I do it, people aren't going to show up and not make money. I believe that for a long time. I still kind of believe that.
Yeah.
So
therefore, we're a liability then rather than an asset.
I mean, you and I are like going through this contract right now, and it's almost like every time we have to remind each other, like, no, we're good. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, well,
we're constantly shitting on each other. We're like, nah,
right.
we just talking about bus stops. We're gonna quit. Blah blah blah.
Right.
But it's like, I wish that I didn't have to say that to make myself feel better. I wish that I could just be like, nah, this is a good podcast. But I have such a hard time saying that.
It's such a weird thing because, you know, to your point, Alina, like people, you don't know about this space necessarily, which is totally understandable, right? And hey, these people, like Priya and the other people of color, the chefs of color, they, may not have known either. Hey, they're food people, they're food experts and stuff like that. But, hey, the white chefs were getting paid. So you couldn't so the argument that like, oh, well, maybe because, you're not that famous, you shouldn't get some money. That doesn't really work because I had never heard of any of these other chefs before either. Yeah. And they were getting the cash. So I'm like, okay, well, I don't know all the stuff about the contracts and stuff like that, but like, I feel like it's pretty straightforward. Pay them as much as you pay these other people. Like,
I think like,
I don't know why. I don't know what rubric they're using where they can't do that.
It's the white variable.
I think the issue that, it really is like a systemic issue, right? Because like the people that got famous first. So even if you're talking about it in terms of seniority, the people that were allowed to be in those videos first were white people. So they automatically have seniority, which like the people of color didn't even have that opportunity. So there's not going to be like, even saying it's based on seniority, you're not accounting for the fact that like there was a barrier there.
Right.
So, like, that's an issue. Also, transparency is an issue. This whole idea of not talking about how much you're paid really just, like, hurts your ability to negotiate. Like, because who tells you how to... Like, no one teaches you how to negotiate. That's something you have to learn either through mentors or just through it happening and all of that. Like, I, at one point... while I was still living in Japan, I was talking to a friend of mine there and was feeling really upset about this one kind of job that I was doing. I was like, I'm just working so many hours and I have no support and I'm not getting paid and like the way that I feel like I should, but I don't really know what's appropriate. And he's just like, just because you love what you do does not mean that you don't deserve to get paid for it. So like, and I think like people take advantage of your passion so
100%.
Often.
Yes.
Like, they're like, well, you love it, and this is interesting, and this is good for you, so I'm not, like, you're getting some sort of fulfillment out of it beyond monetary, so we don't have to take care of it. Like, so that's, like, and I think that's part of what happens in food, like, definitely, in, like, the test kitchen and stuff. They're like, well, you're getting all these followers, you're getting all this, like, exposure, you love working in the kitchen, you like being on camera, so, like, why aren't you okay with this? But it's like, I don't know, it's just a little more complicated than that. Also, I'm sure like the job, I think the issue is that they weren't hired for that job to begin with. They were hired to be working in the kitchen, and then suddenly they're being wrapped into these videos, and there was no like real moment of like, okay, now we're adding this to your responsibilities.
To your responsibilities.
This is what we're compensating you for in addition to what you're actually doing, instead of it just getting rolled up and then like becoming this kind of thing. I don't know.
And you kind of bring up a great point too about, for me as a consumer, when I was watching these videos, hey, I liked all the different people on there, but what made it also good was all the different people who were on there, all the diversity, all the different kinds of perspectives you were getting. So
Yeah.
you could make the argument that the reason why this was successful in the first place was it wasn't just certain kinds of people being shown on the YouTube. It was on the YouTube videos. It was all these different kind of perspectives. So they're entitled to some of that equity because they helped make it successful. Whereas I think a lot of times people think, oh well, these videos are successful and because we did all the work and you kind of were just in the background and just hanging out.
Yeah.
And that like that gray area, I think people can take advantage of you. You know what I'm saying? To your point,
Yeah.
like because you love doing it, or you're so lucky that you're sitting in the background. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And that's such a good point too about because you love something, people think they shouldn't get paid for it. And hey, I don't like comedy, but I should definitely get paid for it because it sucks. So
Yeah.
it's crazy, and it kind of sucks. I mean, it really sucks because in the end, Priya and Sola and Rick Martinez and these people, yes, they're still going to be working in the magazine, but they're not going to be in the video. That's what really what this comes down to is they got cut from this channel.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And this channel is that's the bottom line.
Yeah, no, Condé Nast really screwed this one up. Like, honestly, like, I was talking to my brother about it last night, and he's like, this could have been their reboot. This could have been, like, Degrassi.
They were onto something.
Season 2 or whatever. Like, like, just, like, bring in new characters, like, do the whole thing. Like, it's a new story.
Bring in new characters.
It's true.
I mean, like, that's just essentially what they're being forced to do now. Like they could have made the decision to do it in a nice, smart, good way, but instead they're just like, they screwed it up.
It seems like they just didn't. I think calling out someone or something is like phase 1, but people really want to see phase 2, which is like your actions, and like typically, I mean, you would think a corporation would be like, okay, we screwed the pooch on that one. Let's do a whole new program, and then they're still like, no, we're gonna pay you $30,000 like that.
Yeah.
These numbers are so I just can't understand like what. Yeah. Also, when it comes to food, I don't know why people of color get mistreated because like. I don't know what kind of food channel America would have if you just took away all the food that come from different countries. Like you
just have bread. You'd have bread, Fumi.
And then my mom laughing in the background. Bread.